Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for taking out time of coming to our platform and talking to the entire group of people who are interested in patient care and safety on this World Patient Safety Week. I'm privileged to be here to talk in front of you on a concept which has had even more important because of this COVID-19 pandemic. This has unveiled the huge challenges and risks health workers are facing globally, including healthcare associated infections, violence, stigma, psychological and emotional disturbances, illness, and even death. We have lost many of our colleagues nationally and internationally, and we all are grateful for their ultimate sacrifice in care of humanity. Furthermore, working in a stressful environment makes healthcare workers more prone to errors which can lead to patient harm. Therefore, the World Patient Safety Day 2020 has more meaning in this year than ever before in the history. I've got a panel of erudite persons across India. I have got Justice Ashim Kumar Banerjee, who is an alumni of Scottish Church College, Calcutta. And after enrolling in the Calcutta High Court, he was moved to advocate of West Bengal Bar Council way back in 1976. He has been a renowned corporate lawyer for 24 years and then was elevated to the bench in 2000. And then the President of India appointed him as the judge in 2013. He became the acting Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court. And then he was elevated to a very important role by the government of West Bengal as the chairman of the commission, the Health Commission, which looks after the healthcare delivery of our state. I'm privileged to welcome Dr. Atul Mohan Kochar, who is the CEO of our NABH, the National Accreditation Board of Hospitals and Healthcare Providers. He is a constituent board of Quality Council of India, set up and established to operate accreditation process across the country. He is attached as a consultant dermatologist, as a practicing doctor of his own right in Maulana Azad College of Medical College and Lok Nayak Hospital in New Delhi. I'm privileged to welcome Professor Dr. Jyotirmoy Pal, who has got numerous research activities both nationally and internationally and published uncountable reports, chapters and books. He is currently the Vice Dean of API and editor of JIMA, our own, very own national medical journal, which is read by the most doctors of our country. I've got Professor Dr. Tamal Kanti Ghosh. He's a Special Secretary, Medical Education and Senior State Nodal Officer of Organ Donation, Department of Health and Family Welfare, and he is the pivotal person in running the organ transplant, especially in this COVID era, and he stands as a guide for every single problem for us. I'm also privileged to welcome Professor Dr. Shantanu Tripathi, who is a pioneer in clinical and experimental pharmacology as part of professor and head of the Department of Calcutta School of Tropical Medicine and member of multiple professional societies and the Drug Association and the Advisory Council of India. Is considered as a national authority in autonomic nervous system and its pharmacological manipulation. So it is my privilege to welcome Justice Ashim Kumar Banerjee, to start the proceeding. Thank you. অসীম দা মিউট হয়ে আছেন।
I'm sorry. I'm audible, I think. Now I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are. Sir.
Achha. Very welcome. Good afternoon. I am privileged. I am honored. There is a small town not very far from Calcutta named Noshipur. There lives a person, very wealthy person, Mr. Bishoy Kumar Ogniban. Male, 99 years old, mentally alert, physically fit, batting without any flaw. And his centenary celebration committee has been formed, making him the chairperson. The person, he has made his wealth in his life by contributing his sweat and toil. He loves him the most. Now he wants to transfer his wealth to Eden Garden branch from Noshipur. But the difficulty, there is a barrier called ozone layer, which does not allow him to transfer. So he has to keep everything here and live for heavenly abode one day or the after. He wants to cross his century and then go. Now he is a person spending his retired life and at the same time keeping a close vigil on his wealth. Now he has only one friend, philosopher and guide, Khatta Mitha, his fourth generation, 4-year-old, who is his companion in the evening stroll in his lawn. Everything was fine, but here comes the corona, the deadly evil. Now everyone is panicked, so is Mr. Bishoy Kumar Ogniban. Now nobody knows whether he would cross the century. He is also not sure because of corona. So he wants to make arrangement for his wealth. Now, whom to trust? He discusses with his friend, philosopher and guide, who does not give any hint or any idea. With great effort by theory of elimination, he could find out two persons, his house physician and his family lawyer. They become witness to his last will and testament. Now Mr. Ogniban is free to start his journey for heavenly abode. Thank you. You have given me some extra time to come to the topic. I have been assigned the topic of ethics and medico-legal issues. Now, I have just narrated the story of Mr. Ogniban as these two topics of mine would have the answer within this story. Trust, gentlemen, this is the only word which is really troubling us in this millennium world. Earlier, in our earlier days, the people used to believe these two persons, the house physician and the family lawyer. Sir, everyone fills up his belly, and for which he has to find out a means of livelihood. He has to maintain his family. But these two noble professions, one would take by choice to serve the mankind, and in the process their belly is fed. Sir, now in this complex world, when there is a lack of trust between a client and a lawyer, between a patient and a doctor, whom to blame? Sir, the situation, the complexity, the problems galore, the periphery, the surrounding circumstance, we can blame. But one has to find out an answer to this. Should we at the end of the day would blame them just to hide ourselves behind the curtain? Sorry, sir, no. Sir, these two professions, why I am saying these two professions? Because I would belong to one profession and you on the other. So these are two noble professions, and we serve the mankind. Now coming to the ethics. What is ethics? Today, I am Anuel. I go to a setup, spick and span, polished floor, beautiful ladies manning the reception desk, the luxury of the room, everything fitted therein, all electronic gadgets, everything. The healthcare procedures are updated, yet I go there for cure, I pay the price, I buy the treatment, and buy one, get one free, I get Baumani Acelurobacter. My family gets back my body for cremation. Whom to blame? Is there the Infection Control Act? Is it possible for the patient to see whether the setup is well equipped with the infection control mechanism? These are areas where the people are very suspicious. We are talking about the ethics. Ethical part of it, whichever a profession you choose, ethics is something where you answer to your conscience. Whatever you do, does your conscience speak? Every time, if you ask your conscience that, are you pricking? Have I done anything wrong? Then the problem would not be there. Sir, I'm not blaming the doctors as a whole. Similarly, the black robes also, being a student of law for the last 46 years, there are similar problems here also. A client comes to a lawyer, explains everything, including his flaws. And when he comes out, he would have a second thought Have I done the right thing? Would he not consult the other side lawyer and disclose my follies? This distrust, where from it is coming? It is coming because of lack of communication gap, lack of manifestation of what I do, and lack of transparency. Being a chairperson of the Medical Health Commission, whatever you say, it is Clinical Establishment Regulatory Commission, we often find that at least 70% of cases where we pass no order, we find from the bedhead tickets, the medical records, the doctors tried their best to cure the patient. However, despite best efforts, they failed in their process. Yet, the patient party makes a complaint. Why? Because the patient party says, sir, we are lay persons, we are non-medical persons, we do not know what is happening to our client, to our patient, our dearest and nearest one. We are spending lots selling our jewelries, selling our properties, everything, because we want to get back our dearest and nearest one fully cured. Yet we get his remains. Very rightly said. The doctor said, sir, see the records. I have done my best. Then why there is no breach? Because there is a lack of communication. I would often say, I'm born and brought up in North Calcutta. Even in my student days, very near to my place was RG Kar Medical College. We used to go there, a joint family, many people are admitted. That time, private healthcare system was not so much there. Everyone would go to the government establishment every time, and we find that this mustache, having nice mustache, the UP Brahmin Darwan, with his voice, he is calling people, Dr. Abhinay Mukherjee साहब को मिलने वाला पेशेंट पार्टी को आप आ जाइए, डॉक्टर साहब को टीम को साथ बात करिए. This thing is lacking today. And I tell you, please do not take me amiss. I'm not blaming anyone. Even a great lawyer arguing a case for the whole day comes out of the court and have a sip of hot coffee, spending time there, then goes back to his house. But he has not a single minute to talk to the person concerned who was patiently listening the argument but does not understand what is going on. A line, even when he is walking along with you in the corridor, just to say that, look, these are the problems, I'm trying to manage it, let us see. These few words, absolutely superficial, would be absolutely priceless. And here the bridge is built. Sir, medico-legal issue, what is medico-legal issue? A doctor when he sees a patient, he would fix a CCTV in his chamber. He would just start his audio recorder to record all the conversation. It's not possible. It's not physically possible. One has to have trust on the other so long they are going for a joint goal. But as I say, ask your conscience. If your conscience says, yes, what I do throughout the day, I do my best, and I do my best not only, I manifest it. There is transparency that I maintain. If it is done, then there would be no legal issue, no medical issue, nothing. Everyone is human. Tuar is human. A surgeon, he does the surgery. Can you vouch that there would be no injury? A gallbladder is removed. There would be no bile duct injury. I do not know a surgeon who can claim that in his say 30-40 years of career he has not injured any bile duct. Might be so, but the moment it is done, he must do whatever is required at that present moment and explain the entire thing, including your follies, to the patient party. That this has been done. I am not God. I have done my best, but in the process, there has been an injury, there has been a bleeding, but I could stop the bleeding by this process. There would be no distress. There has been no medico-legal issue. Medico-legal is a phenomena. We recently, it is popular. I do not know, maybe 30-40 years back in Western world, that might be, I have no idea. But in India, in 30-40 years back, this was not there. So, sir, at the end of the day, I would say any profession, whether it is medical or legal or any profession, any work, particularly when we are dealing with people as a frontliner, then there must be a communication bridge between the service provider and the service taker. If the bridge is built, there would be no problem. Otherwise, the problem would bound to be there. Thank you. Thank you all. Dr. Bandyopadhyay.
Thank you, Dada. Thank you so much for enlightening us with your vast experience, and start with a beautiful story which tells about our heritage of Bengal, how the medical service, which has principally evolved in this part of the world in India. And as you know, I come from the same the institute, which was the first medical college in Asia, 1835, Calcutta Medical College. So thank you so much. And I'm really grateful and honored by your presence, Dada. May I now request Professor Dr. Jyotirmoy Pal to enlighten us about his idea and his knowledge about the unrecognized safety imperative, the burnout among healthcare professionals. Unmute, please. Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Move করছে না কেন? কৌশিক কৌশিক মুখ করছে না মুখ করছে না কোনটা কোনটা এটা Thank you, Dr. Shyamashis Bandyopadhyay, for inviting me such a time-honored symposium for the safety of patients. To start, my issue is burnt out of the physician and other healthcare workers. So, burnt out of the physician is not a new entity, but this has surfaced during the COVID period. We are doing working, and we are burnt out. But nobody to listen. Before going to the subject, I discuss from science to philosophy or philosophy to science. That is the heart of Indian heritage. So before going, just I will give a small video clippings. I don't know everybody is Bengali or not, whether everybody will can understand or not. But this is very significant in this burnt out period. Famous writer Suparna Kanti Ghosh very nicely expressed the emotion of a singer, how they become fatigued after singing, meeting the demand of this audience. So in Bonaparva in Mahabharata, Joko asks Yudhishthira 18 questions. That is called Dharma Vak Upakhan. One of the questions was, who is the friend of one who is ill? Yudhishthira replied, it is the physician. He is the friend of whom who is ill. In evolution of the perception of doctor to the society have changed from in the last 5,000 years. In the Vedic period, doctor was a god, Dhanvantari. In the Greek Roman period, he was a savior. After the French Renaissance, he became the friend and philosopher. After industrial evolution, and in the modern period, they are the service provider. So these changes from God to the present service provider. We doctors, we the medical professional, nowadays, we do not expect people from our society we consider as a God. But we expect, we work from our own motivation. So there is two ways of motivation. One is intrinsic motivation and other is extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation has a three pillars. There is the autonomy, competence, and relatedness. That means I work from my own happiness. I become satisfied by doing this work. And there is the external motive. I hold a very high position in administration, or I got a very high social position. So two motivation made us to work in the profession. But scenario is changing. Scenario is changing. The burnt of the medical profession, I told, it is not a new issue. It is the general issue. For the 100 of the years, medical profession become burnt out. But during the COVID period, only the issue has been surfaced. The general issue was high workload, practice setting, dissatisfaction, sleep deprivation, some pressure from the administration, malpractice, so many issues. But during the COVID period, this burnt out issue has come up because of the high workload, because of the fear of infection, to be infected from the patient, social isolation, stigmatization. Because when our doctors are going to the society in his accommodation, in his flat, people are stigmatized as if they are the carrier of the disease. They are not allowed to enter in their own accommodation. Fear of isolation. If I am become infected, I'll be stamped out. I'll go to the isolation. The fear of isolation, fear of quarantine, social and medical issues, and stress of the disease and self, and isolation also from the family. All these issues make the physician during the COVID tour more burnt out than what happens than previously. So the burnt outs have scientifically have some stages. One is emotional exertion. Then is coming the depersonalization. Depersonalization means I am detached from my patient's care. That means I am treating the patient as if it is an object, and this leads to decreased self-efficacy and competence. Ultimately, I am burnt out. So, in a UK study among doctors during COVID period, emotional exhaustion is almost found more than 50%, 54%. Depersonalization up to 44%. And the last is the low personal accomplishment, that is 6 to 93%. So the burnt out issue, even in the UK, is very high, up to 54%. So our society have to do something. The definition of the burnt out, it was first described by Dr. Harvard in 1974. It is a syndrome of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and sense of low personal accomplishment that lead to decreased effectiveness at work. Depression, there is some difference between the depression and burnt out. Depression is a expression of your unhappiness in every sector, but burnt out is basically your unhappiness in your workplace. But ultimately, burnt out as spillover to the other sector. That means if you are burnt out at the workplace, this transmit also in your family life. So depression and burnt out has some similarity, but ultimate outcome is the same. There is a dissatisfaction from yourself and dissatisfaction to family. So history, I told this is not a new entity. There's a lot of research in 30, 40, 50 years regarding the burnt out issue. Among the 5 topmost profession that has been burnt out, there is maximum is the emergency medicine, because with the intensivity, we see most of the patient, in spite of our effort. Professor Dr. Bandyopadhyay correctly told that we give our full effort, but the patient died. There is the emergency medicine, critical medicine, family medicine. We have attached with the family emotionally for last 30 years. Now one day the person died. So there is the emotional attachment and emotional bonding that has been disrupted. So family medicine, obstetrics, and list is the internal. These are the top 5 professions that has been burnt out in last 30, 40 years. And from the bottom, it is coming to pathology, because their attachment to the patient is low. Psychiatry, ophthalmology, pediatrics, and rheumatology. They are coming the lowest tier. So all the practitioners, irrespective of the specialty, are subject to be burnt out, and coming top from the emergency medicine, coming lowest to the pathology. So COVID-19 has exposed the ugly fracture of the society in terms of untouchability, in terms of burnt out issue, and not only in terms of infrastructure and policy, also attitude of the society, perhaps carrying the virus in the latent phase. Pandemic only revitalized the virus from latent to dormant phase. So we have the issue, burnt out issue, for last so many years, maybe for 100 years, but pandemic only has exposed the virus, only revitalized the virus from latent to dormant phase. So our doctors at the COVID period are in dilemma. They are dilemma whether they will continue the clinic, because at one hand there is a pressure of the socio-economic issue of self, and other side there is a risk of getting infection from the patient to self, and when they will go back home, there is a chance of harassment of healthcare worker as if they are carrying virus from clinic to residential area. So there is a chance of segregation of the neighbors, as if they are spreading the virus from here to here. Also there is some dilemma regarding the decision making. Whom will give the ventilator? Whom will give the home isolation? And all the evidence-based medicine self-protection, professional commitment, pressure from the media, pressure from the administration, all leads to the dilemma in the COVID crisis period. So as a result of this pressure, as a result of the dilemma, we suffer, we the healthcare worker are suffering from so many signs of symptoms of burnt out. Most common is the depression, anxiety, substance abuse, broken relationship with our mates, may not be with family, denial. I cannot see. Some fever patient has called you, Dr. Sahab, I am suffering from fever, please see me. You are afraid that if I see the patient in an unprotected way, I may be acquired the infection. So denial. So there is a broken relationship with our one neighbor who have a relation for a long period. Avoidance, lack of attention to details, and paralysis by analysis, and failure to commit your own ethics and own duty. All these symptoms of burnt out and made you the perplexed. So the perplexed doctors agitate. Perplexed doctors agitate all over the India on various issues. Some dehydrated medical worker agitate for the PP, agitate for the protection, agitate for the proper accommodation, agitate because hostels are not safe, there is a congestion. They agitate to the authority, but who will listen? Because doctors, it is a politician, it is the bureaucrat. We are carrying the corona burden, but gun is in our shoulder. Politicians and bureaucrats only kept their finger in the trigger. But at the same time, it is true, all doctors also not above criticism. In Kalvela, in Somoresh Mojumdar, লিখেছিলেন ডাক্তারদের অর্থের জন্য মানুষের মন নিম্নগামী হয়। হয়তো আমাদের শুনে ভালো লাগবে না, গ্রেট সিঙ্গার নচিকেতা ক্লিনিক ডাক্তার নিয়ে গান লিখেছিলেন, আমরা কমিশনের জন্য পেশেন্ট দেখছি, কমিশনের জন্য রোগী পাঠাচ্ছি। কিন্তু ফ্রম সেম সোসাইটি, সত্যজিৎ রায় মেড দ্য মুভি গণশত্রু। ফ্রম দ্য সেম সোসাইটি, মানিক বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায় written the story of Shoshi Daktar in his very old book. There is a Putul Nachi Riti Katha written in 1935. From the same society, so many doctors at present, more than 350 doctors expired in a COVID warrior. So many doctors, even a young doctor of age 27 years died in the COVID battle. কিন্তু যখন একটা ইয়ং ডাক্তার 2200 কিলোমিটার ট্রাভেল করে পুনা থেকে কলকাতা এসে লকডাউন করতে, তার জন্য কিন্তু কোনো নচিকেতা গান লিখিনি। যখন মব ইন্দোরে তার ডাক্তারকে অ্যাটাক করে, কোনো কিন্তু রেস্কিউ করতে কোনো ভিলেজার্স আসেনি, কোনো সিম্প্যাথি দেখা যায়নি, কোনো প্রোটেস্ট ঝড় ওঠেনি। যখন এইমস এর রেসিডেন্টরা যখন তার অ্যাপয়েন্টমেন্টে ঢুকতে গিয়ে ইভিক্টেড হয়, তো আমাদের সোসাইটিতে untouchability is becoming a major issue, because doctors are the carrier of the infection, in spite of fighting so many bloods in the COVID warrior. When everybody in his own room during the lockdown period, these are doctors and the policemen and the scavenger, they were on the road. So in my editorial in June issue, I raised the issue untouchability that become the other face of pandemic. So salute to doctors, healthcare workers, police and scavengers, and salute to people who have ring and bell, who have cheered, who express solidarity to us. In spite of more than 350 doctors died in COVID war, we are in the war, we will not leave the battlefield. Our Secretary General IMA, Dr. R.V. Asukan, very collectly written unsung heroes of the Indian COVID war, write their history now. Yesterday, Dr. Shantanu Sen, past president IMA, correctly raised the two issues in parliament. One, insurance should be extended to all doctors, whether he is government doctor or private doctor across the country, and all doctors who are fighting in the COVID should be declared as a COVID warrior. That is the demand to the society, but society has not fulfilled this demand without placing in the parliament. That is the sorrow in our mind. So remedies to prevent burnt out. There are so many issues in the Western literature, making healthcare provider aware of the potential burnt out, promoting positive mental health, mindfulness, healthcare practice, ensuring the availability of mental health services and digital technologies to prevent burnt out, and creating an enable environment through organizational approach. So these are the Western approach, how we can prevent burnt out, how we can save the doctors. But in India, I told I will discuss from philosophy to science or science to philosophy. We should not go in so much issues that has been written in the Western literature because I request everybody read this article by Dr. Sanjay Kalra, Dr. Sarita Bajaj. It is the Bhagavad Gita for the physician. Very nicely in this article, they have written how only reading the Bhagavad Gita, the doctors can come out from the problem of burnt out. Just one slok that is written in Shankha Yoga, 47 number slok, second chapter. Karmendo badhikarambe ma phaleshu kadachanam. Now we doctors should not think about the outcome, our for the duty. So without any emotion, without any attachment, we have to work. We have to work for the people, and we will reach to the God. So once Swami Vivekananda asked Sri Ramakrishna, why people always suffer? Cannot pollution. What are the India will think in next 2000 years? It is the vision of Swami Vivekananda. So every answer we will get in Bhagavad Gita. You will Swami Vivekananda. That is the vision that is very relevant to our medical profession. Even these odd days, arise, awake, and stop not till our goal is reached. তো শেষ করব রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুরের একটা সুন্দর কবিতা দিয়ে, যদিও আমি খুব ভালো আবৃত্তি করতে পারি না, যারা বাংলা বোঝেন তাদের হয়তো ভালো লাগবে। দুঃসময় কবিতাতে উনি লিখেছিলেন, যদিও সন্ধ্যা আসিছে মন্দ মন্থরে, সব সঙ্গীত গেছে ইঙ্গিতে থামিয়া, যদিও সঙ্গী নাহি অন্তর অম্বরে, যদিও ক্লান্তি আসিছে অঙ্গে নামিয়া, মহা আশঙ্কা জপিছে মৌন মন্তরে, দিক দিগন্ত অবগুণ্ঠনে ঢাকা, তবু বিহঙ্গ ওরে বিহঙ্গ মোর, এখনই অন্ধ বন্ধ করোনা পাখা। রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর বোধহয় আমাদের জন্য মনে করে এই কবিতাটা লিখেছিলেন। আমাদের কিন্তু এখনো পাখা বন্ধ করার সময় আসেনি। কনফিডেন্ট our medical profession will come out from all this problem, and I am very confident that we will build up a very strong democratic healthy India. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyotirmoyda, for an excellent deliberation. And as always, with Rabindranath Tagore, who has spoken for every single situation of humanity, be it even our current situation with Corona, very aptly coined by you that this is a bad time, Dushamay meaning in English bad time, and together we will win over this bad time. Thank you once again for your fantastic presentation. May I now request Professor Atul Mohan Kochar,
Thank you.
Our NABH Chief Executive Officer, who has been the instrument of standardizing healthcare services and delivery across the country. I'm honored, sir, for your presence in our webinar, and may I request you to give your deliberation. Professor Atul Mohan Kochar, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamasis. I'm really grateful to be in such distinguished company. It was such a wonderful experience listening to Justice Banerjee, Professor Jyotirmoy Paul, I mean, these have been talks which are straight from the heart and really moving experience. I've had the good fortune of spending many summer vacations, some of my most valuable time in Kolkata, Deshopriya Park, Garia Hat, Rashi Bihari Avenue, Lake Terrace. So these are very, very fond moments. So I never miss a chance to join my friends in Kolkata. On today's Patient Safety Day, I have a very brief presentation. I think I have 10 minutes. So over the next 10 minutes, I just wish to introduce NABH to all the audience again, formally, and reiterate what Justice Banerjee has already said, actually, about how taking care of small things, that art of medicine, which he quoted from RG Kar Medical College, that personal touch, that empathy can win back the situation in the time of standardization. So while we are talking about standardization and while we are talking, Dr. Jyotirmay talked such eloquently about that so many doctors have lost their lives, so many healthcare staff have lost their life. But still, when we talk about standardization, we do not mean a robotic thing. We mean it's a personal. We have to retain the art also, and yet we have to take care of our own also. So just I'll start with a very brief presentation about NABH. Is my screen visible, please? Hello? Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So this is essentially about NABH. My name is Dr. Atul Mohan Kochar. I am a professor of dermatology at Maulana Azad Medical College. Currently serving my time as the CEO of NABH. We have to do these admin things. So it's great to be here, and let me salute all of you present here today and all the entire our healthcare facility fraternity who have been the frontline warriors in the war against this global pandemic. To tell very briefly about Quality Council of India. Quality Council of India was set up in '97 by a Government of India in association with the three big industry body, ASSOCHAM, CII and FICCI. It's an independent organization under Ministry of Commerce, specifically the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, DPIIT, and it has the mandate to lay down the quality systems across working environments in India. So that was the essential thing. Our chairman is appointed by the Honorable PMO. Mr. Adil Zainul Bhai is the current chairman. He spent his years in McKinsey and he's a true thought leader. Dr. R.P. Singh is our Secretary General. And under Quality Council of India, there are 5 boards. There are 4 accreditation boards and 1 quality promotion board called NBQP. For the accreditation board, you have you already know that about NABL. NABL is about labs, which has been so much in focus related to the RT-PCR. You may know about NABCB, which is about the accreditation board for certification bodies. NABL currently has 5,500 labs, of which only 1,200 are about medical labs and rest 4,000 are the industrial labs. Education and training standardization is handled by NABIT, and quality promotion, I told you, by NBQP. Then we have a whole lot of special project groups and a total of about 750 young professional, old professional, all working towards a quality ecosystem. All our boards are benchmarked against international organizations like NABH is benchmarked against International Society for Quality in Healthcare, ISQA, and the Asian Society, ASQA. So we are an accredited body. Our lab is by APAC and IAF. These are certain ministries where we collaborate actively and work for. This is about NABH, and we take up a whole lot of projects. For example, Kayakal project, then the Q Mark. Our programs extend to Ayush Mark, the traditional health worker support, and whole lot of government projects we are very keenly and clearly associated with. This is a brief snapshot of all the programs. Currently, we are undertaking 21 broad programs under 3 broad categorization of accreditation, certification, and empanelment. So accreditation, we have hospital program, we have a full-fledged Ayush hospital program, we have medical imaging services, eye care, then PHC, CHC. So since 2005, so 27th June 2005, NABH came into standing. And over the past 15 years, there have been multiple additions of various programs also, and various versions of these standards which have shown improvement, and currently about 9,600. So these are the total number of accreditation and certification, and these are the empanelment. So currently 9,600 hospitals are enrolled with us, but we wish to take it to every clinic level. Every individual doctor's chamber should be certified voluntarily. That is our aim, just like it is abroad. So there are lakhs of such things, but we want more standardization. When we say about standardization, I told you, our standards are recognized and accredited themselves by global ISQA. This is our certificate of accreditation. We are into our 3rd cycle, and current cycle, because of COVID, has been extended till July 2021. All our standards are, though they are benchmarked, but they are self-reliant, truly Atmanirbhar standards, indigenized, and very, very practical. We are into our current 5th edition of standards. So this is the 5th edition standard, which we launched in February, and in April they were accredited by the national, by the IAEA, which is the ISQA arm for international accreditation. Now I realize, as a clinician, I can very, very confidently say that most clinicians do not understand these standards. In fact, they think of it as just another licensing or a bureaucratic nuisance to be done away with. They are too busy. Some of them are burnt out also, or rather majority in the post-COVID era. But these standards are the way to go. I mean, some standardization in our healthcare facility is a mandatory requirement. It's not mandatory, it's still voluntary, but it should be. And it is not going to spread or take effect unless all clinicians, all the busy clinicians, find out time and take interest in these processes. It appears that we have so many young professionals in the audience today, so many quality people in the audience today, but my message is more towards the hardcore clinicians who are busy looking after this thing, to understand that, to understand these standards, which are self-explanatory. All our standards are divided into 10 chapters. And these chapters, 5 chapters are patient-centric, and the other 5 chapters take care of the hospital standardization. What is the facility, what is the HR going to be like, whether certain processes are there. And all these are generic standard. NABH does not tell anybody how to conduct your hospital. So NABH only lays out that you should have a certain process to take care of your staff. So 5 chapters are for staff well-being and 5 chapters are for the patient well-being. So these are to be aspired to, and that's a muhim which we are carrying on with. And then COVID happened, and we have a system, and we had to change the system and live in the new normal, so to say. And we also realized that the future depends on what we do in the present. So this is that we started with a very robust e-learning portal. So we all know about the webinars. I mean, we launched a Quality Connect initiative. We thought that we must reach out and connect to all our people. And this Quality Connect initiative, we have done about 100 webinars on various topics. And most of them are already present on our website under the resource section, so people can look. So all aspects of Ayush, then relevance of quality in the time of crisis. I mean, it should not be seen that quality is another unnecessary nuisance to be dealt with. I mean, it is not that. Please truly believe me, I come from a government public funded hospital. Maulana Azad, you know, is attached to Lok Naik Hospital in Delhi, and that's the biggest setup. It's a dedicated 2,000 bedded COVID center right now. But beyond that also, it is all specialty. It is not NABH accredited, but it is mostly departments are NABH compliant. But leave aside that, the idea is that clinicians have to take part. These are some of our webinars like Code Blue, then Protect Thyself. I mean, how this webinar very correctly addressed the issue of physician burnt out only. Mental health challenges in the COVID era for the protector, for our providers, for our senior doctors. We are working with home currently. We moved to virtual meetings, virtual assessments, and we recently initiated the digital health standards also. So these are being formed, and we hope to bring clarity to the issue of telehealth and telemedicine about who should be the owner of the data, the content. Justice Banerjee very rightly said that our medico-legal cases will not happen if we just take care of certain basic issues. So with digital health, it is still in the open. So with that, we hope to bring out some very, very logical, self-explanatory standards, which will cover the issues of interoperability, the privacy, the security, and the content management, the consent. So this is our website. You can take time to visit our site, look at the resource section, and maybe it will be useful for all the quality professionals. It is www.nabh.co. And from 15th of August, I must say that we decided that in our effort to reach out to people, we made all our standards free of charge. So all clinicians, I'll request, all nursing officers, anybody who's working in a hospital, you must take out time to browse through our standards. What exactly are these standards? I'm sure all are hard pressed for time, but quality department of Apollo, for example, or every big hospital, they are very well versed with NABH. But our mission will not be complete till from top to bottom, all are aware about what these standards are and what they mean. So you must take out time to download these free standards across maybe whatever specialty you are. We are working on stroke standards also, dialysis standards also, cardiology standards also. So basically when we say standards, we do not mean that all of you are not following them. All of you are leaders in your own right and doing your best in your chosen fields. But when we say standardization, we lay stress on processes, that you must have a certain process. We do not question, we do not want automation. We want you to be the master of your art, but you must have certain mechanism of registering a patient, then treating a patient. We do not question the treatment as long as it's evidence-based or eminence-based, but you must follow a protocol of a record, and then patient safety is supreme when all these aspects are covered about. So that is what NABH stands for. You must stand with that. We have a strong foundation, of course, of service, quality, efficiency, and patient is supreme. It was said, and quality, safety, wellness is our essential parameter. So talking about that, just a minute, please allow me. So this was something very, very superficial, if I can say, about NABH. My issue now is that I must. What does quality have to do with the accreditation? What value does accreditation bring to the quality? So my take is that with all the PPE's availability, with all the uncertainties of the pandemic which has been there, unless we follow certain norms, because we saw during this pandemic that accreditation has been a great enabler of adopting the SOPs, which were dynamic and fast changing. So practically hour to hour guidance was changing. Every hour or practically every day, there used to be a new guidance. You do this, first masks were there, then masks were different type were there. So all hospitals which were accredited, they adopted these SOPs fast. And because they are used to doing their code code red, code blue, code orange, code purple, code pink. So they adapted to these disasters very, very often. So it is a way of life. So accreditation is a way of life, and all of us have to be involved. And ultimately, if we are to genuinely talk about staff safety, because the theme for this year's Patient Safety Day is healthcare workers staff safety. And that will not come only if you are just working in a big setup. That will come only if you are practicing quality on a daily basis, not exactly doing lip service. And please allow me to, I heard a story from Justice Banerjee, so please, I thought that I should also tell a story. And this story is essentially about a car, let's say a Rolls Royce, which is guaranteed for life. And once a gentleman ordered a car from London, it came, it was guaranteed for life. After 5 years, it stopped running. So there was absolute, chaos that how can a car of the Rolls-Royce stature stop running? So they called up the, tele helpline. The engineer came with the same flight, next flight, and they landed in India. Then they checked and they said, unfortunately, sir, the car does not have an engine. So they all were shocked actually. How can this happen? How can this car not run? So then they said, sir, this is Rolls-Royce. It will run for a few years on its reputation only. So practically a big hospital like Apollo will keep running on its reputation actually because of the culture, the just culture which it has followed. But ultimately, till all of us contribute and really work very hard, the car will stop one day. So my message is, my guidance, my suggestion is that all of us must take care of ourselves. Very, very seriously, diligently follow the donning, doffing guidelines for PPE. Take our safety very, very seriously. We must, if we are to wash hands 10 times or 8 times or 9 times, we must follow that very, very regularly. We have to also follow the social distancing norm within our constraints. Actually, that burnt out thing is very, very thematic. So there will be pressures, and we are not to question, and in this time of disaster, we cannot question, and we must stand up and do our bit as professionals. But at the same time, due concentration must be there on our safety also. So may all of us remain safe. Thank you so much for having me here and spending time for me. Thank you so much. Grateful.
Sir, it has been a real honor and pleasure listening to you and your guidance. And as aptly said by you, that we have to look after the basic principle and then apply the standard for best patient outcome. That is why we are all here. That is why we are in the business. That is why we come to hospital or to the clinic every day for best patient outcome. And with your blessing, I'm really honored and indebted for your time and your fantastic guidance. Thank you, sir, and we will meet again. May I now request Professor Dr. Tamal Kanti Ghosh, who has been the beacon for organ transplantation in Bengal, and who has been also the main force of continuing transplantation in this COVID pandemic time. And I request Tamalda to please give us your idea and your knowledge about how organ transplant in this time of the pandemic can continue with the role of organization and the citizens, without whose contribution we cannot go forward. Dr. Professor Tamal Kanti Ghosh.
Thank you, Ramadis. Thank you very much. I'm very thankful to you for giving me an opportunity to share this platform with eminent persons like Justice Ashim Kumar Banerjee, then Professor Atul Mohan Kochar, Jyotirmoy, Dr. Tripathi. So today I'll be talking on the scenario or the role of organizations and the scenario of organ transplant in COVID. Actually, the organ transplant, the recipients are at risk, and it has the number of organ transplant which was going earlier before the era of this COVID has come down. Organ transplant recipients, they are at risk for more severe COVID-19 cases, and there is a potential risk of infection transmission, the donor to the recipient through organ transplantation. So I'll go through some slides rapidly. So actually, presently in India, we need about 10 lakhs of organs, which is required. And for the last few years, we have improved a lot by doing awareness programs, creating an awareness in the donors as in the general public. People are coming voluntarily to donate their organs after and pledging their organs. If you see here that the disease donor rates per million is quite low in India as compared to the other countries. Spain has the highest. So we have tried that how we can improve the status. The world status of transplant, if you see, the annual number of kidney transplant per million population in USA is 52, Europe is 27, and Asia about 3. Now the patients in India which require organ transplant, for example, kidney, we need about 250,000 kidneys per year and 80,000 liver tissue per year and about 50,000 heart transplantation and 1 lakh of cornea transplantation. And so there is a gap between the organs which are required and the supply of the organs. So now in December 2019, this outbreak of the COVID started in Hubei, and 31st of January, WHO declared that COVID-19 nCoV outbreak is a public health emergency and of international concern. The novel coronavirus were named as COVID-19 in February 2020. We noted during this, so you'll also agree to that, we noted there is a strong temporal association between the increase in the COVID-19 infection and a striking reduction in the overall solid organ transplant procedures. We have seen for the last, after the outbreak of the COVID, the organ transplant, both live as well as the disease organ transplant, it has come down. The overall reduction in the Western countries, it was about 90% in some 90% in France and about 51% in USA, whereas in our country also there was about 90% dip in the organ transplanted during this area. Now I'd like to show you the figures of disease organ transplant. If you see in 2018, we have done 24 kidney transplants, 7 liver transplants, and 4 heart transplants. In also 2019, there was 23 kidney, liver 10, and heart 5. But unfortunately, in 2020, we have done few earlier. But if you see it in comparison to the earlier year, it has dropped down from 24 to 12 this year, and liver transplant is 6 and heart transplant 4. We are really lucky for disease transplant organ because some of the hospitals here, like Apollo Gleneagles Hospital, INK, and SSKM Hospital, they came forward and they declared brain death and they have retrieved organs, which has helped to acquire this number of cases. So if you see here again, it's a graph is showing that there is a trend in compared to the earlier years, there is a drop. So a transplant in times of COVID is considered risky because it is considered risky by many of us in view of the problems of donor selection, recipient selection, and also infection control. Another important point which we like to point out is that during this COVID situation, most of our workforce were busy in treatment of the COVID. So even the doctors, the nursing staff, they have put their whole force on the management of the COVID. That's why there was also reduced manpower in the field of for doing transplants. Transplant can also be considered in emergent cases in centers which have dedicated to facilitate ensure safety of the recipients. So the pre, peri and the post-transplant areas, including the operation theater, need to be specifically earmarked for this purpose. That is very important. But unfortunately, as I told you, that the junior staff and the middle tier staff, they were all, put into the COVID management, which has already, if you see in our medical colleges also, most of the faculties and junior staff, they were all engaged in the treatment of the COVID. So there was a, vacuum was created. The staff in the care, there has to be adequate availability of the PPE. Obviously, it was available. The center should not be earmarked for the treatment of COVID patients and needs to have a protocol for patient movement. So wherever this COVID treatment is going on, the transplant should not be done, or there should be a separation between the organ transplant area and the COVID treatment area. The transplant be considered after clear counseling, because people, the recipients or the donor, they are also very, apprehensive. So there has to be proper counseling of these patients. If you see the scenario of live organ transplantation, we can see that previous year we had done 819 renal transplant and 5 liver transplant. But this year, during this endemic era, we have only 200 kidney transplant and only 2 liver transplant. So you can imagine that there is a real dip in the number of transplantation. Another important thing which has to be discussed is that there is scarcity of data and the consensus on the effective treatment of coronavirus in transplant patients. There is no consensus regarding the modification in the immunosuppressive regimen of the transplant recipient. The dose adjustment has to be balanced, the infection control and the organ rejection. The patients which undergo organ transplantation are under the immunosuppressive therapy. So they become more prone to getting the infection, COVID-19 infection, unless and until excessive care is being taken. The Indian Society of Organ Transplant has suggested certain, they have given a protocol, and they have suggested that kidney donor transplantations may be best delayed during this period, except in few emergency conditions. What are these conditions? Rigorous, before starting any transplantation, it is better to do an epidemiological survey, which should be conducted among the potential donors and their families. There is status of their health status, their COVID status should be done. Individuals who have been exposed to a confirmed or suspected COVID-19 patients, within this we all know, within last 14 days, who have returned from abroad, should not be accepted. And we should do the PCR, PCR for all the patients, nasopharyngeal specimens. So regarding living related transplants, individuals who have been exposed to a confirmed or suspected COVID-19 should not be accepted, and also the PCR should be done similar to that of the disease organ transplant. In case transplant has to be done in an acute emergency setting, it should be performed with appropriate assessment and evaluation of COVID-19 infection. Appropriate counseling of both the donor and recipient. We are doing the counseling in other in non-COVID condition also, but here stress has to be given on telling the recipients as the donor about the consequences of the COVID infection, or what are the steps that has to be taken and how they can cooperate with the transplant team. We know the current outbreak is unpredictable. If widespread community transmission occurs, healthcare infrastructure and capacity issues may have further effect on the donation and transplantation. These recommendations will be regular. The recommendation should be regularly updated, and NOTO is regularly updating the informations to account for the changing epidemiology and new information regarding the treatment and testing are also given by ICMR and Government of India. All transplant units must be aware of the national and local guidance of the managing patients. I must be thankful to few of the hospitals like Apollo Gleneagles Hospitals, RN Tagore, and few other hospitals like SSKM Hospital in the government sector, that they have taken a lead, especially during this endemic period. They are doing regularly transplant board meetings, and they are also doing transplantation. Especially is I'd like to inform you that during this period of epidemic, we have 3 brain death patients, and their organs were retrieved and they were transplanted. And one of the heart was sent outside to Mumbai. So we have to the transplant team and all healthcare workers working in the hospitals, they have to come forward, because we don't know how long this epidemic is going on, but we cannot stop the patients, those especially the patients in their end stage disease like in kidney disease or liver disease or in heart disease. So we cannot stop ourselves, we have to move forward. And for that, the organizations who are the NGOs, the hospitals, they have to create awareness and they have to do the regular programs. I would like to inform you that during this epidemic, we have conducted transplant boards twice a month, every Tuesday, second and fourth Tuesday of the month. We have not stopped. We have been working on that, and we have been giving NOCs to these patients. The transplant is really at risk during this epidemic due to, immunosuppressed. These patients are under immunosuppression therapy due to the immunosuppressed state. They may not manifest symptoms like general population. Fever may be absent in all cases as reported from the study from China. Transplant units are advised to consider ways to limit hospital attendance of the patient, such as rescheduling non-urgent outpatient appointments, virtual or telemedicine or telephonic appointments, home delivery of immunosuppression if feasible, but not mandatory. Patients with stable graft function and adequate drug supply can avoid routine follow-up visits to the hospitals. So the organization, the transplant units are advised to consider ways to limit hospital attendance, as I've already told, by rescheduling non-urgent outpatient appointments, virtual telemedicine appointments, home delivery of the immunosuppression drugs. And as a citizen, I'd like to give a message that all of us, all the citizens have a responsibility. We know there is an epidemic, COVID, this is an epidemic, but the normal work should not stop. In the meantime, we have also started our normal functioning of the hospital apart from the treatment of the COVID patient. Similarly, considering the transplant, which is very, very important and is related to the life saving of certain end-stage diseases, we have to become more aware and we have to disseminate a message that we should come forward, especially brain death declaration should be done by the intensivist and the hospitals, so then we can get more and more organs can be retrieved and organ transplant from the diseased organs can be done. So with these few words, I would like to thank that we are still working on organ transplant even in this era, and we need a support from the organizations as well as from the citizens by creating an awareness. We have already circulated to all the hospitals that please try to give most focus on this organ transplant and also along with their normal day-to-day work and COVID treatment. So I thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me an opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Tamal Kanti Ghosh. We have been honored to listen to your personal experience and guidance regarding transplantation during this difficult time, and you have been the force behind us to continue to do transplant, as you know. And I use this platform to tell all my colleagues and friends who are in the webinar to propagate the need of cadaver donor for getting the transplant movement up and running in this part of the world. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much.
May I now request Professor Dr. Shantanu Tripathi, who has been a very close guide for all of us about medication management, about right prescription, and he is himself an authority on this medication and management of safe practice of medication. We know that prescription has been difficult in this COVID time because of so many obstacles in actually putting the prescription by the doctor and then putting that prescription to the pharmacist and getting the medicine to the nurse and then to the patient. So I request Professor Tripathi to enlighten us on this very important topic of medicine safety in time of COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Shantanu Tripathi, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamashis, for your kind words. And it was a great opportunity that you have provided to me by asking me to be present here. It's a great learning experience. It was really great listening to Doyens, starting with Justice Banerjee, and then Professor Pal, our own Professor Tamal Kanti Ghosh, then Dr. Kochhar, and of course, I think you are going to be the host is going to be the last speaker, I know. It is always a great place. Job has been made simpler because some of the principles are guiding us this difficult time has already been articulated very well by the predecessors, by the speakers. Very new, excepting for the fact that how the this disaster, the pandemic, has actually cornered us, okay, and particularly in reference to use of medicines. As we know that medicines remain the cornerstone, the mainstay of healthcare today, okay. But at the same time, we all also know that medicines are otherwise a very tricky kind of tool that we are armed with, and one needs to very carefully handle this tricky tool, okay, because this is known as a double-edged sword. And when you talk of medicine safety, somebody said that there is nothing like a safe medicine. There can only be safe physicians. There could be safe hospitals, safe healthcare professionals. But when you talk of safe medicine, it is something which doesn't exist. There can't be any safe medicine. By this, what they meant actually, when you talk of medicine safety, this concept of safety is a relative concept, relative safety. There is nothing like absolute safety related to use of medicines. Starting there, the safety of medicines, or in other words, that's the reason why people have started talking of patient safety. Finally, it boils down to the patient remains at the receiving end and whether they are safe trying to address the problem, okay. And one of the weapons in the hands of the doctor is these medicines, and how responsibly the doctors and the other healthcare professionals, they are using medicines in the best interest of the patients. And for that, what you require is not just knowledge, but the wisdom. We through our experience, we develop this wisdom. Otherwise, in today's era of automation, okay, and the artificial intelligence, okay, you could have created a supercomputer and you just feed in your diagnosis, and then the best possible medicinal solution will be otherwise, okay, come in your computer screen, and you can give that. Why there is a need for a doctor? But here is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. It's not enough to know, or difference between information and knowledge, and the knowledge and wisdom. It's not enough to know what can be given to this person, but we need to also understand the person as such, and then only we can perhaps use the medicines safely. COVID-19 pandemic has really, apart from many other issues, it has caused a devastating impact, not just to the civil society in general, but in particular for the major economies of the world. And we know that how healthcare sector is also affected by this COVID pandemic. Apart from the healthcare sector's contribution to maintain our health and provide us all the comfort of healthy living, apart from that also, when you talk of healthcare industry for that matter, it also has a huge economic implications, and the COVID-19 has also impacted that to a great extent. Now, of the different prominent stakeholders, we all would accept who are involved in delivery of healthcare, we are in fact in the midst of a continuous adaptive mode at struggling to adjust ourselves in our ongoing strategy, okay, to help the patients, okay, and because it's a very rapidly evolving situation. What we know today, tomorrow we are told that no, it's not really right, or it is more risky. You should think of discarding that, and you come out with, you start using the second option, because that seems to be a relatively safer option, and also it is, so far as the risk benefit ratio is concerned, it is more acceptable. So here lies the issue. Not just safety inside, you can consider whenever you talk of safety, so you have to all the time weigh the risks and the benefit is outweighing the risk, and you are actually embracing it, you are using it. But then we need to remember that patient being at the receiving end, their perception is they need 100% safe kind of intervention from the doctor, which is otherwise is impossible really. So we need to also get into dialogue with the patient that there is nothing like absolute safety, and if you are interested in getting benefited out of this intervention, you have to develop your mindset that you have to accept certain risk. So the attitude of risk acceptance actually the key issue. To what extent we are ready to accept the risk in order to get the benefit of some degree of benefit. Okay, so that is the continuous risk benefit analysis is happening, and that is happening at all the levels, starting from the discovery and development of healthcare intervention, be it a drug or a diagnostic or a vaccine or whatever. So when they are being developed at every stage of their development, there is continuous risk benefit analysis, and even when they have come in the market, it is the doctor in every prescription, they are also doing the risk benefit analysis, because when they are confronted with the next patient, that patient is also posing a unique kind of problem to them. Okay, so the risk benefit assessment will be altogether unique and different for this patient, and thereby whatever the doctor is ultimately prescribing, we must expect, the patient should expect that a thorough risk benefit analysis is done, and so far as this particular intervention the doctor has prescribed, that he is convinced that it is going to be chances of benefit is more as compared to the possibility of any kind of adverse consequences or adverse experience that can happen in this case. So that is the key. Now in COVID situation, the additional kind of specific kind of or unique kind of medicine safety concerns that has come up with this COVID pandemic that in order to treat COVID-19, which is absolutely a new disease for that matter, in the month of February, in the month of March, we were almost clueless about what this disease is. And even today, nobody can claim that we have understood the disease, okay, up to the bottom. So our knowledge is still continuing so far as this disease is concerned. If we do not understand the disease, how can we treat it really? But then, based on our wisdom, we are trying this or that, which has some degree of rationale for their use and which otherwise offers some degree of hope that this can benefit. So we are using some of the old medications, okay, which are already known. We are trying to use them, okay, based on our some degree of theoretical basis and some degree of maybe baseline, the laboratory based evidences, okay, laboratory level evidences, or in vitro evidences, in vitro experiment evidences, or some of the early in vivo experiments. So whatever little evidence that has generated, based on that, we are trying to use certain medicines. But you will understand, appreciate that most of the time we are actually trying to control the symptom. The available treatments, whatever we are using today, okay, the hard and strong evidence is really lacking. And most of these are not really licensed for the indication, for the specific indication of use in the COVID. At best, some of them have an experimental or investigational status for for use. Okay, the emergency use authorization has been granted. We need to remember that emergency use authorization is not equivalent to approval. Okay, marketing approval. So it is still in the experimental phase. And when it is investigational status is given to such a medicine which comes in the market, or which comes in the armamentarium for treating COVID-19 patients, then every physician becomes an investigator. So he is actually dealing with a lot of uncertainty. Okay, so when you talk of risk-benefit ratio, here it is, yes, we have a strong expectation that it can benefit, but there are some unknown risks also involved. We have to accept that. And same is true with the vaccines. Vaccines have not yet come, but we are expecting it, they will come. But then there is also a huge issue, okay, because we are otherwise, okay, in a race for developing a vaccine. So people are also concerned that there should not be any kind of compromise with the safety of the vaccine. So there is no scope for to have a proper risk-benefit ratio. This also one needs to think seriously. Hydroxychloroquine we are using for prophylaxis, and also there were suggestions that you can use it Yeah. Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Can anybody? Yeah. Okay. So I was here in hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, whatever are being used as prophylaxis. Some of them are also advocated for treatment also. Azithromycin, low molecular weight heparin, dexamethasone, remdesivir, tocilizumab. All these, there is a need to continuously remain vigilant about their safety. But the problem is the careful monitoring of the clinical parameters, laboratory indices, whether it is hematological, biochemical, immunological, etc. So there are also continuously, there is a huge pressure and huge limitations. Under a highly limiting condition we are working. Okay, the kind of constant nursing care that we otherwise expect, that is also to a certain extent is possibly not being feasible in the current situation. So there is always there is a scope for additional risk being creeping in there. Okay, when you talk of use of the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors or receptor blockers, etc., oral anticoagulants, even nebulization. A patient who requires nebulization, whether in a COVID ward, you should use nebulizer, okay, because that creates that the mist that is created, aerosol, that may be otherwise posing the unnecessary risk to the healthcare professional. So instead of nebulizer, one goes for the use of meter dose inhaler. But one should also be cautious, use a shared meter dose inhaler. There is a possibility in a low resource setting like ours, use of shared meter dose inhaler among patients. So why, if it is you are doing this high risk behavior, so there is a possibility that secondary bacterial infection from one patient is transmitted to another patient by shared this thing. So all these are risky behavior, not just always related to the medicine safety, but in the broader perspective of patient safety rather. Then again, there might be many patients who also have comorbidities and they were otherwise under chronic treatment, long-term care, long-term treatment with many medicines. How what is there, they call it the transition of care. So I was at home, otherwise well controlled with my diabetes and hypertension with many medicines, but then I'm diagnosed to be RT-PCR positive for COVID. So I get admitted in a hospital, but the chronic treatment that I was receiving, whether in the hospital, okay, so there the focus or the emphasis is on COVID care, and the otherwise the medicines that I was getting at home, to what extent that care is also transitioned properly. And then again, when I am otherwise I'm lucky enough, okay, fortunate enough to otherwise recover, and when they are leaving me and discharging me from the hospital, how they are transitioning me, whether they have kept in mind about my hypertension and diabetes and the kind of medicine they are writing in the discharge certificate, okay, and whether they have counseled me properly, so that back home I start taking the medicines that my doctor has prescribed in the discharge note, and also continue to take medicines that I was taking earlier when I was at home before hospitalization. So these also pose a lot of risk. So there is a need to continuous counseling, and communication is the key to patient safety. Role of healthcare providers, yes, to a great extent that has been compromised. There is no denial to this fact, but then we should also try to find out, to the extent possible, how we can also put in place a system whereby the more vigilant healthcare can be in place, so that it does not risk patient safety. So that is the key of the need of the hour. Another important ethical issues are regarding the medicine safety or patient safety considerations in the non-COVID ailments. Okay, because COVID has come, right now Professor Tamal Kanti Ghosh was telling us about the organ transplantation movement, how that to a certain extent, how that has been affected. The need for organ transplantation cannot take a backseat because the COVID has come. Similarly, if I am suffering from hypertension or diabetes, my care, I need continuous long-term care. So that cannot take a backseat because of the COVID pandemic. But that's what is happening. And because I am unable to visit my doctor in his clinic because the clinic is clinic is closed, I'm unable to go to the government hospital because OPD is not running in the same kind of this thing. And so what I do is I take recourse to self-medication, self-treatment, okay? So that also is creating a lot of risk to me. Okay, lack of access to healthcare setup, whether it is clinic or OPD or inpatient care, and also lack of access to laboratory tests in the pandemic setting, that is actually disrupting in the management of chronic non-COVID care. So hugely patients' rights are being violated, and there is a huge ethical implication of that, apart from, of course, the legal connotation of this. periodic monitoring based, whether it is hypertension or diabetes or hypothyroidism or whatever, psychiatric disorders, that has faced a lot of issues. Various adverse effects of medicines that are used in non-COVID regular care has created fear and panic regarding some of the COVID symptoms. Some of the symptoms of the drug-induced problems, drug-induced symptoms, adverse effects that can also mimic with the presentation of COVID, okay, or clinical features of COVID, and that is creating unnecessary anxiety and panic. And I cannot get it corroborated because no doctor is available, okay, to have a clinic visit. So doctors, for the last 3 months, what patients are experiencing, doctors have gone into telemedicine mode, and rightly the government had come up to find a solution to this, and telemedicine has now received a lot of legitimacy in the last 4 or 5 months. One way that is great, okay, that is good, we welcome this, but at the same time we should remember that telemedicine and e-medicine platforms have their own limitations, okay, and also to the extent of there might be legal implications. When you talk of a prescription is a written order, but in case of telemedicine practice, how you are going to write a prescription when you are giving oral orders over telephone, and when I am listening to your telephone verbal instructions, there is a possibility of transcription error, and the responsibility of that transcription error will go to the healthcare professional, the doctor. So these are also issues that needs proper solution. Okay, we are learning through this difficult time. Okay, and also we are actually working on these opportunities and trying to find solutions. Okay, lack of access to healthcare has also led to rampant self-medication with over-the-counter products. And also even prescription only medicines and unsupervised medication of the common diseases and also existing long-term diseases, and this is posing additional risks and they require proper vigilance. So we need to be more vigilant actually under this COVID pandemic time. Overall, then, this is the last slide. Overall, then, how to address these issues? We need to, as a general rule, the patients, the general people need to be more disciplined in medication use, and for that it is again the healthcare professionals, the healthcare fraternity, medical fraternity owes greater responsibility in educating the public, what the public should do during this time, during this difficult time, to behave more in a more disciplined manner in reference to medication use, number one. And also more and more public education strategies are to come out, more leaflets, more television programs, okay, radio programs, etc. should come out, and I think doctors and medical associations, professional bodies, they should come out and engage into greater dialogue with the common people, lay people, so that unnecessary and which are preventable risks, they can be minimized and the harms can be minimized. Deprescribing is one solution. We talk of prescribing, but then this is a right time when we should think of deprescribing. Okay, unnecessary, okay, redundant medications, they are to be deprescribed, and we need to take that responsibility of deprescribing. The same patient, particularly if I'm an elderly man, okay, so I may require 5 different prescriptions from 5 different super specialists, but I am the final common path. I have to honor these 5 different prescriptions. Okay, sometimes there might be duplication also. Who is going to do that deprescribing? Because there is the concept of the common physician or the basic physician, home physician, that is gone. So this COVID time has given us this opportunity to again explore the importance of this family physician concept, and getting engaged into unnecessary medications are to be withdrawn, that is deprescribing, or unnecessary high doses that can be reduced, and avoid the prescribing cascade. The phenomenon of prescribing cascade is a drug-induced problem is being treated with a second medicine causes another problem, you use a third medicine to treat the second medicine induced problem, and that's how it goes. And if you are unfortunate enough, after say 7 or 8 such endeavors, you may come back to the primary problem for which you started getting into this, trapped into this cascade. So we the doctors need to break this chain of prescribing cascade. There is also a need for thoughtful use of technologies. We are blessed that we have the great technologies these days with the smartphone and the smartphone-based different apps. We need to thoughtfully use them to minimize the risk of patient safety, risk of medications, unnecessary use of medication-induced, drug-induced problems. Okay. We need to address the special patient groups, whether they are elderly or they are pregnant individuals or the young children. So, and to really identify and understand their problem in reference to medication use and try to find solution which otherwise fit them most. We have to understand that COVID-19 has put us into a great challenge, but at the same time, we have to also appreciate it also has offered a lot of opportunities to us for creating newer knowledge. We must use this opportunity to create newer knowledge for the welfare of the mankind. Communication is the key to success. We need to communicate, and the real good communication, meaningful communication with all stakeholders, including the patients. And innovations are warranted. The unique problems will have unique solutions, and we need to innovate always. We all understand that yes, we need to be flexible, okay, because this situation actually demands flexibility for addressing the problems. But then in order to be flexible, we cannot compromise with safety, okay. So without this flexibility, we possibly cannot think of solving the kind of problems that we are confronted with. But then we cannot and we should not compromise safety, patient safety at all, by no means. With this, I think that was the last slide. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Shyamashis Bandyopadhyay, for giving me this platform. And to be wiser, each time I attend this kind of program, I actually learn. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shantanuda, for your extremely well thought advice on how to prescribe in this difficult time and how to keep on prescribing safely, keeping the best interest of the patient in mind. And of course, as you have rightly said, that we are on an evolving trend of medicines these days. There are a gamut of medicines which are being continuously evaluated. Some are getting obscured. Some new medicines are coming in. There's one medicine, as you know, in Russia, which also getting a little bit of publicity. So yes, we are treating COVID patients better than what we used to do maybe 2 months before. So we will be doing it in the best interest of the patients, and some of the treatments will further evolve. And I think in next month or so, we will have further idea about what would be the best treatment options, and maybe something new will come up as well. And we look forward. And this pandemic has taught us many things. One of that is definitely how to expedite medicine, formulation, then practice, trials, how to do trials quickly, how to interpret the data of the trials quickly, and then how to carry on maybe phase 4 studies in a short period of time. So thank you once again, sir, and we are really indebted for your time. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our webinar on this World Patient Safety Day. And I am actually indebted to all of our speakers and all of our participants who have really been wonderful, participating for more than 1.5 hours in this platform. And I am grateful to you all, and I conclude the session with your permission. Stay safe, stay well, and in case of any advice, please feel free to email us or send us in WhatsApp as been provided, and we will definitely try to get the answers from the erudite speakers and come back to you. Thank you again. Thank you, sir. God bless.